Hi and welcome back to Bike Speed. So this week we're going to service this Giant TCR. We're going to do the new cassette, the chain, we're going to check through the bike, make sure it's all operating as it should do, re-oil certain components and re-grease them, and we'll talk you through that as we go. So as you can see from this bike is in great condition, but we're just going to give it the little TLC that will make all the difference to it. So initially you can see the chain is stretched out 0.75, so the chain at this stage needs replacing. It's already started to wear the cassette, and it will not be long before it would wear out the chain ring and the jockey wheels on the derailleur. So it's important to keep your chains in good condition. Now this is a common problem I see on a lot of bikes, a skewer spring the wrong way around. It's thin side towards the hub, wide side towards the outer of the skewer, and then it will seat in the frame correctly, and also you can get those jam on to the hub itself, so it's important that you put those the right way around. I could tell from this cassette when I took it off that it's got wear on a few of the rings. I can sort of pick out the rider's favourite gears when I see a cassette like that that's wearing off with the chain. We know at this stage that cassette needs replacing. And when I looked at these components as I took them off, you can see how it's got a shiny residue on the oil or grease, whatever was used to lubricate this chain. And we need to clean all that off and put our own oil onto the components that are moving, because it left quite a bit of a residue. So we're going to clean all that off, and that would just make everything run a little bit more efficiently as the bike moves forward. And we also just take out the chain ring there, we check it over, so I can see that it's still got a little bit of wear left in it. We'll clean off this residue that you can see there on my finger. We'll get all that chain ring cleaned up, which means you're not going to be dragging that residue through your chain as you're riding. And then I'll also, while that chain ring's out, I'll check the bottom bracket, I'll feel the bearing, I'll check for movement and play, and just determine at what stage the bottom bracket is when we do each service. And in this instance the bottom bracket was absolutely fine, so there was no need to put any advisories or do any work on the bottom bracket in this instance. I'm just going to strip everything down now, so we're putting these into the ultrasonic cleaner. This has got a water soluble degreaser in there, which you can see I'm washing off here. So we put things like the brake and the derailleurs and just odds and ends through the ultrasonic cleaner, just so that we can really get that clean deep rooted. It's a fantastic way of cleaning parts like this, because you can get into the little gritty areas that you'll have no way of cleaning with a rag and a brush simply alone. So with the ultrasonic cleaner, that really works away at the depths of a component, and it's just amazing the way it brings them up really. So we're washing down the chain ring, the brakes and the derailleurs themselves. Obviously we're replacing the chain, we're replacing the cassette. Now with these jockey wheels, they had sealed bearings in them, so I didn't want to put those through the ultrasonic cleaner. So with these I actually just used a brake cleaner and just wiped off the surface of the jockey wheels themselves without actually putting that through the ultrasonic cleaner and sort of working out any oils or greases that are in those sealed bearings. And then we just start to re-lubricate and rebuild each component. So you can see here even the thumb adjusters, I'm greasing and lubricating those, because it'll make it so much easier to adjust the bike and to get it right as it's on the bike down the line a few months when it's been rid on a few times. May need a little adjustment. With that all lubricated up, it's going to be absolutely fine to do that without any seizure. We use thin oils on the pivot points, as you can see here on the brake and on the derailleurs that we've already done. And then I'm going to use a general purpose grease along the shaft of the skewer there, just so that it stops it sticking in the axle, and then an anti-seize grease on the thread. Now the headset bearings on this were very tight when it came in. I was able to adjust this up. I could still feel a little slight noise there, a little gravelly feel, so I advised the customer that in due course he's going to need his headset bearings done, although they weren't actually too bad. But I just feel that this time of year, we're in winter here in the UK, and it's not always the best time to service all the bearings. They're actually better to do them in the spring, so as you get your good weather in the summer without destroying them, and the winter's a time to let them really go life extinct before you have them done maybe in the spring. So we just advised on the headset bearings here. So like I say, we're in the winter in the UK. I don't know what your season is wherever you're watching us in the world, but what do you do for the winter? Have you got a separate bike? Do you service them pre-winter? Drop us a comment in the comments below and tell us what you think of your winter riding and your service regime for the winter. So now we're just putting on the new cassette, we're torquing that up, And then just one thing which we often mention in videos, because it's pretty much every bike that comes in where the logo on the tyre is not lined up with the valve, and I just love to line a tyre logo up with a valve. Makes it easier to find your punctures, also aesthetically looks correct. It's good practice to line up your logo with your valve. I just check your rotation of your tyre. The majority of tyres, especially on road bikes, are directional, certainly on mountain bikes as well. I just make sure that the arrow is pointing forwards and that your tyre is actually on the rim the right way around. We'll now inflate that up, and we've checked this wheel all over. These Mavic wheels are actually a great wheel, a well recommended wheel for the sort of everyday bike like this. So now we're just going to rebuild the bike, begin to get everything tightened. At this stage I only ever sort of hand tighten, pinch tighten everything together, because I'll then adjust it before we go through the torquing to make sure that everything's correct. But at this stage you just put everything on the bike, generally just tighten it up, adjust it, make sure it's perfect, and then we'll do the torquing, which you'll see. A little bit of anti-seize on the threads of the brakes does no harm at all, because they get a lot of mud and everything up the brake bridges, and it's quite hard to sometimes remove those because of all the mud. Things go rusty, and it's just good to get plenty of grease on these, anti-corrosion grease, and I just find that easier to service next time. So that's what we're doing there with those brake bridges. Get the brakes back together, get the wheels on, and then we're really beginning to get to the home run on this bike now. So we've got the new chain, it's lubricated with the original manufacturer's lubrication on that, but you always want to use a nice thin oil when you're lubricating your chains. The thicker oils tend to build up on bikes and you will get a very pasty finish to your bike by the time you're servicing it. So a nice thin oil on your cassettes and chains just make the world of difference. We'll just check the adjustment of the derailleurs, make sure everything's working right. Just adjust up the brakes, check that they're pulling squarely onto the rim there by just spinning it a few times and doing any adjustments as necessary. And then I'm just going to work through the bike with a torque wrench, get all the torque settings right. You can see here this brake lever was a little bit loose on the right hand side, and yet I've serviced this bike in the past, so even things like that can work loose over time. Vibration of road, you have to remember these bikes haven't got suspension, so they're absorbing all that vibration, which is why it's so important to service your bike regularly, just to make sure that everything's tight and taut and the bike is back to spec and where it should really be for your future riding, and that things aren't just going to fall apart and cause you problems along the way with things coming loose on your main rides of the season. Everything now is absolutely spot on. We're quite happy with this bike, and as you can see here, the differences are subtle, but what a difference we can make to a bike. And this bike will now ride absolutely spot on, where when it came in it just had a few little issues with shifting and wear and things, which it no longer now has. So thanks for watching, do subscribe, do drop us a comment, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.